mob of terrorists breaking over a border, going to peaceful...
Is that what Israel did?
Wait a minute.
A mob of
Wait
terrorists
a minute.
breaking over
Let me
borders
finish.
and killing people. Is that what Israel did?
Going through a border on October the 7th.
Oh, October the 7th.
And massacring young people at a festival, massacring families in their homes in a kibbutz, setting fire to them, cutting their heads off, killing babies.
Oh, killing babies. That was true.
Well, fine.
Were the babies vaccinated?
Why are you being flippant?
I'm not being flippant. The point
I find that funny.
No, but the point...
Yeah. All right. About the October 7th attack. October 7th, which is called officially Al-Aqsa Flood, Tufan Al-Aqsa, it was an opportunistic moment by Hamas. And going into hindsight, knowing Israeli history and how they function, militarily especially, it's quite fishy. Like, it seems they deliberately let down their defenses, and Hamas took the opportunity. It was an operation with very, very clear objectives. The Israelis inflated the numbers significantly. Piers, throughout the interview, keeps saying 1,500 victims, and then they reduced it to 1,400, and then 1,200 because they realized from the severe burns, we'll get to that later, why they were severely burned. 200 were Hamas fighters, supposedly, because we also know there were other groups involved. And then after the professional groups went in, many irregulars went in. But today, the officially stated number, 2 months later, it's around 600 something, as in civilians. So it had very clear objectives, and unlike what they keep peddling, these Zionist shills, their objective was not to kill all Jews, like they keep claiming. Their objective on land was mainly to get as many hostages as possible. And history has proven this. They're always able to release many of their brothers and sisters in the Israeli torture prisons only through hostage exchanges. And fortunately, it's very surreal to say, an Israeli life in that context is worth much more than Palestinian lives. So if you look at the Gilad Shalit prisoner exchange in 2011, a crazy number, relatively crazy number, to just one guy was released. Of course, many were still in prison and it wasn't enough, but this was the motivation by having it's just there's no point of killing them all. Now, the rocket attacks were different, and yes, many people fell, and of course, rocket attacks, you can't control who dies and how. They're not precision rockets after all, like the ones the Israelis have. However, the rocket attacks in this context is the underdog's way of being able to fight back under such very unfair circumstances. I mean, what do you expect from them? They're a group who finally, thank God, are able to manufacture their own munitions and weaponry. And they've done a brilliant job, especially with the Yasin rockets, Yasin 105, and it has proven its efficiency against the Israeli vehicles, especially the legendary Merkava, which, growing up, it was always like one of Israel's symbols of invincibility. Thankfully, like they're turning them into paper tigers. Like they're just falling right and left. They're being slaughtered in Gaza right now. And the rocket attacks is their only way, because just like that's all what the media shows. Like the rockets were launched and look, we had to make the Iron Dome, and oh, poor Israelis. But what about the Palestinians who have been massacred? The same way, like with the evolution of time, you look how the massacres that happened of ethnic cleansing, when it was early on just militias, the Lehi, also known as the Stern Gang, the Haganah, all of these groups, the Irgun that later developed into becoming the IDF, with the means back then, what they did, and then with the more their capabilities advanced, the massacres went on at the same rate, just translating into bigger numbers because of the technology. And then from rounding up poor villagers into raiding cities and just bombing Gaza. Like, how many bombing episodes has it had? It's like crazy. It's like the World Cup. It's just something you expect every 4, 5, 6 years to happen. And for any of you who've known Palestinians, especially Gazans, how many do you know that are always mourning someone's death? Either a direct relative or a friend or a far relative. It's just absurd. They're people put in a very, very small area, locked, backstabbed by Egypt and all Arabs. the countries, the regimes, backstabbed by Egypt by closing the Rafah crossing in the south. The sea is completely blockaded and they can't even use it, not for economic, not for military operations, not for nothing, except on October 7th, again, because of the lowered down defenses. Air completely closed. They don't even have aerial capabilities. And by aerial, I mean something like quite high, not just little drones or gliders, which were executed brilliantly on that day. Like, what do they have to do? What do they have to do? The whole world, no one cares about them. No one cares about them. They're just there suffering their brethren, the Arabs, backstabbing them, all of them begging for the Zionists' approval. What do you expect of them? Another objective of the Aqsa Flood operation was the north of Gaza, there's the Eretz crossing. And over there, there's an important military base. That base was raided and destroyed because it contains information, very, very critical information to informants and Hamas traders inside of the Gaza Strip. And this is very vital information, important for the likes of Yahya Sinwar, who's the leader in the Gaza Strip of Hamas, to know and clear out these traders because they're working against them.